Here's our host, Tian Wei.
Hello and welcome to World Insight. I'm Tian Wei in Beijing. Relations between the world's two largest economies have worsened over trade disputes and the COVID-19 pandemic. Chinese State Councilor and Foreign Minister Wang says that bilateral ties are facing the most serious challenges since the establishment of diplomatic ties in 1979 between China and the United States. He called on the two sides to open all channels of dialogue and identify areas of cooperation. The status of the Phase 1 trade agreement signed between the two economic superpowers has come under question recently amid the COVID-19 crisis. So many ask, what about its future? And what about a possible Phase 2 of the trade deal? Will frictions stop it from happening? We are going to discuss these questions with our panelists. For more on China-U.S. trade relations, the latest development, we are joined in Washington, William Li, chief economist from the Milken Institute. Also in Washington, Arthur Dong, professor at Georgetown University's McDonald School of Business. Also in Beijing, we have Professor Yao Yang, director of China Center for Economic Research, Peking University, joining us in Beijing as well. Last but not least, Da Wei, assistant president and professor from University of International Relations. It's a very strong panel. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining me for this discussion. Starting from the latest, President Trump earlier claimed that Phase 2 is impossible. Your quick reaction?
I think the coronavirus and all of the obsession about trying to get our economies to restart under these unusual circumstances has occupied everybody's mind. So in that sense, Phase 2 is put back on the agenda. It still remains a very important item, and I think it's something that we will bring back. But I think the first priority now is to get the global economy back into working condition again.
I would agree with William on that point, but I would also like to add that we are about 4 months away from the presidential election here in the United States, and it's not lost on political observers that President Trump's decision to, in a sense, intensify this global debate between the United States and China by rejecting the second round of the contemplated trade talks with China certainly it plays to his base. And so, you're seeing a number of things that are confronting China now from this present administration: issues of trade, issues of security, issues of human rights, all of these coming to the forefront.
Is it out of surprise, or this is pretty much Beijing could anticipate?
Well, I don't think it was a surprise. I think in China, it has been widely anticipated that President Trump would be fully occupied by his presidential campaign, right? Everything he's now doing is just for winning the campaign. To continue the second phase talk with China will show kind of a weakness for him, right? So he really wants to play kind of a strong face on China.
It's not a surprise at all. The focus now is to how to implement Phase 1 agreement better rather than negotiating for the Phase 2. Though the two sides, I think both sides agree that we are implementing the Phase 1 agreement, but obviously because of the difficulty of the bilateral relations and because of the COVID-19 pandemic, the implementation of the Phase 1 has encountered some difficulties, though it's still in process. So the focus is still Phase 1, and I don't think it's a good idea to negotiate a new Phase 2 in the election year.
Right.
So the political environment is not very good. Yes.
I want to have a survey here. Earlier we heard already from Professor Da that Phase 1 will have some challenges to be implemented. Now, there are several factors we probably have to bear in mind. First of all, the election season. Secondly, ever going down, apparently, China-U.S. relations in various fields. Thirdly, the pandemic. And fourthly, probably the economic challenges facing all economies, including that of China and the United States, purchasing power as well. So with all of these factors in mind, gentlemen, do you think Phase 1 can be implemented on time, efficiently between China and the United States? Please raise your hand. Wow. No one. Okay, so, okay. Dr. Li, you had something to say, but you didn't raise your hand. Go ahead. What do you want to say?
Well, the word that you put in that I couldn't agree with was on time. I think the schedule has certainly been delayed because of the global crisis that we're in and the economic chaos that's going on, not only in the United States, but in Europe and the global economy.
Right.
If the economic conditions were better, I think phase 1 would have been put in place very readily.
The U.S. Politics are changing so fast. Let's just assume it is going to be this president for the next term. He might have some very different agenda for the second term. If it is another administration, we all know when one administration comes into power, they want to topple down the earlier mechanism of work between China and the United States. We see that already over the past few decades. So, Professor Yao, what about that?
If a Democrat wins the election, probably the party is going to change its strategy to deal with China, including how to implement Phase 1 agreement. I mean, Phase 1 agreement is almost like a forced purchase from China, and many Americans don't like it. Right? This is not an honor for market mechanism. I mean, for China to fulfill the first phase purchase, China has to take a lot of administrative measures, strong ones, to fulfill that. I don't think many American economists, from the left to the right, agree with this. Right? So if Joe Biden wins the election, probably he's going to put more efforts on the agenda of the second phase talk, that is to negotiate with China new rules to run domestic economy and the world economy.
But now things are changing. COVID-19, the economies are facing a very different picture. Is there still demand enough coming from China, even with an administrative power? And probably Chinese government has to make sure it is using the administrative power smartly and efficiently to make sure whenever it's used, it can be implemented. So that's another question, isn't it?
Actually, of course, Chinese government cannot force the Chinese companies to purchase something from the U.S. So this is one thing. The other thing is actually Phase 1, we should not equal Phase 1 agreement with purchasing. There are also many things that both sides, particularly Chinese side, agreed to do, for instance, policy adjustment, opening the market, reform, this kind of thing. So far as I know, I think Chinese side have done quite a lot in the first half of this year in that regard. I mean, policy changes. And the U.S. side is satisfied with that. The two governments have very good communication regarding these policy reforms. But of course, obviously, on the purchase part, we have encountered some problems.
Can there be enough incentive for China to still work with the United States and to think about a common prospect? What a common prospect still matter anymore?
Yes, Tian, I do believe that in the long run, the two largest economies in the world and the fastest growing economy in the world cannot be, in a sense, ignored by the United States. At some point, we have to have cooler heads prevail and some, in a sense, elder statesmen rise to the occasion to open up the dialogue between the United States and China. Clearly, there are long-term issues that are separating these two great nations. But unless the parties come to the table and discuss these in an honest as well as open manner, we may never have, a stable relationship between the United States and China. Now, on many fronts, China can be a great ally to the United States when it comes to issues of global security, issues of trade and trade relations, issues of economic growth and the prospect of economic growth for American companies and certainly for American citizens. It might actually be a good thing if we have a new set of leadership in November. That way we can start with a blank slate, in other words, a tabula rasa. Perhaps getting another set of personalities into the debate might be the most refreshing thing that comes out of the events that are about to unfold in November.
With apparent strategic conflict we've already seen, many in Washington believe, against China, will things really change? And will the two sides still having a common prospect that they could work with?
One of the things that we remember is phase one was designed to address the yawning bilateral deficit between the United States and China. And so it's not so much about forced purchases, but China recognized that imbalance had to be addressed. And so buying agricultural and industrial products, including Boeing aircraft, which is a pretty high-tech product, is something that was a very important part of the phase one deal. That has been set back because of economic conditions. But phase two was really the heart of the negotiations, which was to set the rules for market access, the rules for intellectual property protection, and the rules by which the U.S. and China will engage in bilateral trade, a model that will be taken by every other country that deals with these economies. So in that sense, the importance of the phase two deal is to set the stage for how trade in the rest of the world will proceed in the 21st century. One of the things that we know is that both sides recognize the long-term structural problems that exist between the U.S. and China consists of these huge trade imbalances. And that's the problem that has to be addressed.
The social platforms like WeChat and also TikTok, even though any of the accusations have not been justified by evidence. And that is not the only example we have seen about the U.S. accusations against China. In fact, many accusations are being articulated without evidence, but rather with the concerns of threat. Now, Professor Yao, how do you see that trend? Will China also act in a way, once it has concerns about the United States, it will be used as justification to get the United States out of China?
All the accusations against China, in most of the cases, are just rhetoric. There's just one aim, that is to win the election. That's Mr. Trump's strategy, right? So playing hard on China has benefited him, right? So you can see the percentage of people who now have kind of unfavorable views on China, right? So from like 40% to now 2/3 in Trump's administration. So Trump has calculated this in the sense that, oh, this is a good card I can play, so I can win elections. But this time, probably his calculation is wrong. The popularity of TikTok is increasing in the United States. So in the end, probably Trump is going to shoot his own feet using this kind of a silver bullet that he believes in. Right? So from China's side, I think we should stay calm and cool and just let it go and wait and see how that comes out toward the election.
If one is attacking while the other is not reacting, what would that mean for the one who is attacking? Now, that is a debate going on in China about what China should do in reaction to what the U.S. administration is doing right now. Should a habit of being attacked be perceived by the other side as weak, and therefore forever the actions is coming from the United States? So, Professor Da, you are much more an expert than me to talk about this. Tell me more about what is the articulation now going on in China?
I think Chinese side should be adults in these bilateral relations. We need to distinguish what kind of thing, what kind of measure we need to fight back, and what kind of measures that we should not take it too seriously. just as the examples you have mentioned, like WeChat and TikTok, for instance, it's obviously it's wrong, and if China take any tit-for-tat tactic on those regard, I think you just step into the trap of Trump administration. I mean, step into this political fight with it, and also helping him for the campaign. And it's also, of course, harmful to the two economies.
Professor Dong, do you buy into the Chinese side of thinking of being the adult in the room? And also, do you buy the Chinese side of rhetoric suggesting that China is on a moral higher ground in a way compared to at least this administration you have in Washington?
Yeah, Tian, it's very interesting to observe what's been occurring over the last several weeks, if not months. It seems like China has adopted, at least from a diplomatic point of view, the so-called wolf warrior posture. In other words, whatever emanates, whether it's from a tweet or whether it's from the White House, whatever words emanate from the United States, they surely are going to get a very swift response from state officials who will be the official mouthpiece of China. Most recently, we saw, of course, the United States has imposed a ban on the governors of Xinjiang province, and just today, China responding by banning Senators Marco Rubio and Senator from Texas. And so you're seeing this sort of tit for tat going back and forth, and ultimately, this certainly, from a diplomatic point of view, certainly clouds the overall conversation. But that seems to be the nature of the game that we're playing right now. And certainly, since I'm a strategy professor in the world of business, when somebody punches you, you immediately punch back. And so, an immediate response will certainly inform your opponent of what's likely to happen. And so I think from a strategic point of view, sometimes fighting back is a necessary thing.
Professor Zhai, you want to quickly respond to that, your American counterpart?
Yeah, I think, it's true that China have some counter strike. As I said, we have to distinguish what kind of thing we need to fight back. I think those issues related to sovereignty issue, to politics, I think those things are the issues that China feel that we need to have some countermeasures. But other issues like the rhetorics about TikTok, WeChat, I don't think we need to respond to that, because all will step into the trap.
How will the common purpose that can be established in terms of dealing with the Chinese challenges of COVID-19 and the rhetorics trying to portray either China or the United States as the party that should be responsible for a global pandemic, how they are likely to intertwine, but at the same time fight against each other?
When the world is involved with COVID-19, from my perspective, the smart thing for China to do would be to say, here are the clinical practices we've discovered in the treatment of the virus that was useful here in Wuhan and the rest of China that could be useful in the rest of the world. Sharing that kind of practice, sharing that kind of knowledge, the vaccine research, to have a much more cooperative effort in developing vaccines is something that would show the need to cooperate and have advanced form of globalization that would advance both countries. Striking back for the sake of striking back, as I said, is winning battles and losing the war. The war would make us all worse off as two large countries, because we are the two countries that are the adults in the world. We have to act like adults. And in doing so, to demonstrate to the rest of the world what cooperative economic relations is like.
Well, Mr. Lee offered perspective from the American side. Let me offer the Chinese side view. For China, what we see, what's happening in the United States is that basically President Trump and his administration have given up on fighting COVID-19, right? And in the meantime, the resumption of economic activities in the United States has been quite slow, right? So we don't know what's going to happen over the next 5 months. Okay, but one thing clear is that President Trump's occupy task is just to win the next election, right? But on the China side, viewing against the current situation in the world, probably it's much better for China to work better on domestic issues. And on that front, China has done a fairly good job, I would say. We're going to have the data for the second quarter, and I'm sure that all the indicators will show better numbers than the first quarter. So the Chinese economy has already hit the bottom, and in the next half of the year, the Chinese economy will come back. I mean, even with, say, second wave that just happened in Beijing, we see people have become much calmer than before. So even with this kind of small-scale second wave outbreak, I don't think that the economy will be severely affected again.
I see. Thank you so much for the four of you joining us and sharing your insights always. William Li, Arthur Dong, Yao Yang, and Da Wei. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Be safe, you and your family.